Sally King. Sally, hello.
Hello. So Natalie put a post on the Facebook group, which really got me thinking about habitual tendencies. And I was going to ask you a bit more about it because it got, well, the question is, what is the difference between a clinging attachment to a habitual tendency and certain habits we exercise as part of our practice in regards to Buddhism? So, for instance, I put a post on about my mother used to put her slippers in the same place every day. And as part of a mindfulness course, the tutor said to her, right, I want you to move those slippers to a different place every day. And every day it annoyed her and she couldn't stop thinking about it because she was trying to get out of that habit. But what's the difference between that and, say, the rule and ritual of the things that you might do in the centre? So why you might prepare things in a certain way or go into the shrine room in a certain way. Can you sort of explain the difference between the two? Or is it really obvious and I feel silly?
No, no, it's not silly at all. Uh, we are creatures of habit. There is a certain security in knowing where your slippers are going to be the next time that you want to put them on. How many times have we lost our car keys because we don't have a particular place that we put them when we come in the house? So we create this little ritual of putting the car keys in that bowl by the front door because we know that's where they'll be next time. And I think at the center, a lot of we don't go in for a lot of ritual. We're probably one of the least ritualistic centers, Buddhist centers going, because we don't go for ceremony. We don't have that aspect because of the tendency to get confused by it. So, but the rituals that we do have are really all based in practicalities, or they're for the specifically for the development of mindfulness, or both. So things like closing doors behind you has, practical reasons. Like in the winter, it helps to keep warmth in, and it also encourages people to practice mindfulness, not just fly through a door, but to actually be there and be present, to actually close the door behind them. But really, the question becomes then, it becomes, are you in charge of the habit or the ritual, or is the ritual or habit in charge of you?
Yeah.
So, for instance, there was the case with people closing doors behind them when they're on retreat. It makes sense when you're the only person trying to get through the door. But if there is a queue of you trying to get through the door, it makes no sense for each person to walk through the door, then close the door, only for the next person to open the door and then close the door. That would be ridiculous. So there has to be an element of flexibility and adaptability. You've got to understand the context for the rule or the context for the ritual, and then it makes sense. So it's not just a fixed abiding by a certain way of doing things. It is understanding the context behind it, which enables you then to be more flexible with it. Yeah.
So do you think it's good to test yourself now and again with certain things that you do as habitual tendencies to see if you are clinging to them?
Well, yes, but how? I think life does that for us anyway, because if it is that we're clinging to a particular way of doing things, then life inevitably provides us with a rich mixture of conditions, not all of which will be suitable for that particular way of behaving. And so if we behave in that way, we're not acting in accordance with the underlying conditions, and therefore it becomes a very painful thing. We're trying to do things in the way we always do them, but the conditions don't allow it. So it becomes a matter of suffering. So say, like putting your shoes or your slippers in a different place each time might be a very useful thing to do. But life will, it's like, you put your slippers in the same place every day, you expect them to be there, and then one day they're not there. That is, the suffering that will, I know we're using a rather banal example, but the suffering that's produced if you are mindful, it will cause you to reflect. Can you say something, Sally, so that you come back to on the
Hello, I'm still here.
yeah, yeah. Thank
I'm
you.
still.
But everyone just make sure that they have their mics off, because otherwise you come on to the video. So yeah, so the very act of meditation itself and the practice of mindfulness will help develop more of a flexible approach to life, where you can adapt to your response to events, not in a fixed habitual way, but in a far more nuanced and balanced way, balanced to the conditions that you find. Yeah. So you find that you are far more able to adapt. So it's self-concern that causes us to fixate, because we want to be safe, we want to be sure, we want to win, we don't want to lose, we want to get things right, we don't want to get them wrong. And one of the ways we think that we'll be happy is if we've got a set way of doing something every single time, we can't go wrong. But it doesn't work, and it causes people can cause people a lot of agitation, because they need to adapt. They need to learn to adapt their approach to situations. Are we getting there? Does that
Yeah,
cover
no,
it?
definitely. And off the back of that, John had put a comment below Natalie and my comment, which was quite interesting. And I don't think he's here tonight, so I thought I'd ask it for him. Can habitual tendencies spill over into rule and ritual?
Yes, yes. Habitual tendencies are, they do exactly what they say, and it's a very deep question, actually, because having a rule, having a set way of doing something, like if I do it this time every single time, I'll always get it right, I'll never go wrong. That mentality is suggestive of a deep lying insecurity. That, going back to what I said a moment ago, people want to be safe, they want to be sure, they want to be certain. On whose behalf? Their own. They don't want the uncertainty. They want certainty. That's a prison. So even if it is, like we do become habituated towards fantasy or irritability or worry. Worry. I mean, people they do cling to worry. They and it becomes that we don't just cling to the thing that we're worrying about. We cling to worry itself as an identity. So it's all very much bound up with this idea of what we call in Buddhism the fetter of personality belief, either the projection of a persona outward, or what we consider our own identity to be. And people can inadvertently create this situation where they identify their self as being as an anxious person or a depressed person, as a worried person. And as a consequence, they cannot live without the anxiety, the fear, the worry. They wouldn't be being themselves if they weren't worrying. So that's the whole purpose of this training, is to develop the mindful noting, to be able to start to detect these things. And with help and guidance, you are able to start to, what happens if I don't act on that impulse? Well, life is going to suddenly feel very insecure. I'm going to feel frightened. I'm going to feel like I'm not in control. Anything could happen. I don't know what life's all about all of a sudden. And that is, although it sounds terrible, is actually a really healthy place to be, because you're beginning to look at those underlying uncertainties, because they're illusions. That the uncertainty is based on a false assumption about the nature of existence. So that's why I say it gets really deep.
Yeah.
So that's why we practice Vipassana meditation, to really start, because you can't practice it properly whilst you're fighting for security. You have to be open and vulnerable in meditation to whatever wants to arise, which means there has to be this innate willingness to accept that life is uncertain and you have to be flexible. Could be a sound, could be a thought, could be a feeling, could be something you don't want to be there. And it's learning to be open and receptive and allow these things to arise in order to see that the insecurity is actually misplaced. It's misplaced. It's based on a mistaken understanding of the nature of existence. And so the more you practice, the more you begin to recognize the insecurities and not seek to find a solution for them. So in the case of a banal case like searching for your slippers, it's accepting it's perfect as a representative pattern. You have to accept the insecurity of not knowing where your slippers are. You have to accept the insecurity that life is not presenting in the way that you expected it to. You have to start to get used to that, to accept the unpleasant feelings, knowing that the unpleasant feelings will change and will pass away. So if the unpleasantness, the sense of insecurity are transient, you don't have to resolve it. You don't have to seek a solution for it. Yeah. So unless somebody is willing to open up to their insecurities and allow for them and accept, even in principle, that they're based on a false first premise, if they're willing to do that, then they're willing to look at the insecurities and allow them to pass. When they've passed, where are you then? You're in exactly the same place. You still haven't found your slippers, but you're not experiencing that deep urge for control. You're now in a much more open and receptive place where you can examine and experience. So so that's a long answer.
No, that's really, really helpful on a lot of levels, actually, for a lot of things that other things that I was thinking about. So yeah, thank you.
It is really deep. It is a really deep thing.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Okay, nice to see you. Lucy.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Lucy.
Yeah, this idea that after but you don't know what life is all about. I wanted to ask you a question, and I know I've asked you this before on a number of occasions, I think, actually, which is really about trying to nail down the difference between wanting things or living a life and craving things. So what I mean by that is, so for instance, at the moment, we are house hunting. We've wanted to move house for quite a long time. In the process of house hunting, you're continuously saying, well, I want this and I don't want that, and I don't just mean in terms of I want 4 bedrooms, not 3, because that's on a practical level. I mean, you want a house maybe that's not on an estate, or you want a house that's got roses around the door, whatever it is.
Moat.
Is that if you're not supposed to want any of these things, then you get into a sort of paralysis. And the same is true for money. I sort of think, well, am I supposed to want to earn money now or not? If I stop wanting to earn money, I can sit here and starve, but
and so that can't be right, can it? that cannot be what the Buddha's teaching is telling us. Just can't it? It can't be. It would not survive 2,500 years if that's what the Buddha was telling us.
But after I don't know what I'm trying to do anymore. I don't know what I'm trying to do. I don't know if I'm trying to move house. I don't know if I'm trying to not move house. I don't know if I'm trying to earn money, not earn money.
Yes, you do.
What am I supposed to be doing?
Yes, you do. You know exactly what you want. You want to earn money, and you want to live in a different house. You know exactly what you want.
Yeah, I do, but I'm not supposed to want it because that's craving, isn't it?
No, that's your that's your misinterpretation. It's not what the Buddha's teaching is saying at all. Craving is the passionate desire for life to be different than it is. 2 different people, they both want to move house. One has the desire to do that. The other is passionately craving for that situation. If you're passionately craving for that situation, it is an inherent rejection of life as it is. If you are simply looking to move house and are willing to go through all the machinations and the challenge and the friction of moving house, that doesn't imply a rejection of life as it is. It is just merely a wish to change something, which is perfectly okay. That's the difference. It's like it's like it's not the doing away with all desires. The enlightened person has the desire to eat. Are we saying that they do not have the ability to eat subsequent to becoming enlightened? Because I'm quite sure that everyone would decide, I don't think I want to be enlightened then if it means I can't eat. But it doesn't mean you can't eat. It's the difference between somebody experiencing hunger and wanting to put an end to that hunger because that's the way life works, and someone being addicted to food and reject and as a consequence feeling intense personal loathing and intense suffering and getting bigger and fatter and feeling totally miserable about themselves because they need more than they actually they desire more than they actually need. They are caught in passionately craving for life to be different than it is through food. Yeah, so they're two completely different situations. And so we have to use, well, firstly we have to use common sense, because no teaching would survive 2,500 years of people giving absolute dedication and devotion to it as a way to truth if it resolves in, you know, someone having to be spoon-fed because they're enlightened. Just doesn't make sense, does it? So we have to use some common sense, and then we have to engage with, well, what does it really mean then? And if you're sat in a meditation and you're utterly dissatisfied with life because you're imagining this other life where everything is working fine and is working beautifully, then I would call that craving. But if you're sitting in a meditation and you think to yourself, well, we're going to have to put the house on the market, so I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to have to do that, and then we have to inquire about that, and you note that as planning. In noting the planning, there is no wish for life to be different than it is. There's no craving and there's no subsequent suffering. So feel free to get as big or as little a house as you feel free. I mean, not that it's me to tell you that, but you see what I mean. From a Buddhist perspective, it's fine. You want to live in a bigger house? Great. You want to live in a smaller house? Great. You know, you want a different job that pays better? Great. There's nothing inherently wrong about that. That's not the passionate wish for life to be different than it is. So, do you see the difference, Lucy? It's because it's so important.
Well, there's nothing to stop me from carrying on living in the house we're in. We've got a perfect good house.
Okay, so you're not craving then?
Well, I am if I want to move to something that's bigger, better, whatever.
No. All right. What about this scenario then? You want to move, and it causes you distress that you can't. That means you're rejecting your current experience because you crave for a different set of experiences, in which case that's craving. But if you're telling me that it is simply the desire to do, it's time to move, you fancy a change. That's not, if it's not productive of suffering, it's not passionate resistance. There's no passionate resistance there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, I hope that helped. Dave.
Yeah, can everyone hear me? Sorry for the late join.
Oh, okay. There was another Dave who had his hand up.
Oops, sorry.
No, glad you could make it. Is that David Servo?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'm really glad you could make it.
Thank you.
So Dave, who put his hand up.
Oh yeah. I was just thinking on Lucy's house move. I used to recall I've had two situations when I've been buying a house. One when I was really attached to getting the house purchased through, and I remember suffering a lot because there's obviously a lot of doubt as to whether the purchase will go through, and there was definitely craving there for that achievement of that purchase. And I've had another situation where I was okay if it didn't go through, and there was no craving there. And
Yes.
it was an absolute sort of, you know, a really different experience between the two purchases.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, no, I mean that helps to clarify it. You know, so it's whether ultimately it's whether they're suffering or not. It's not about not desiring things. I desired to be here this evening. Am I suffering? No, because it's desire to do. You don't lose the ability to function. It's the passionate craving and the clinging that comes from that passionate craving. That's what's let go of, not the ability to function and to enjoy life. Mandy, hello.
Hello. You know, I find it a good question.
It is. Yeah.
And I'm also doubting, you know, quite often actually about this desire and where it comes from. You know, where does the desire come? Is it more from the same? Is it more for the for wanting better? Or
Well, another way of putting
another way of putting advice, Paul? Can you give?
Another way of putting it is it coming from dissatisfaction? Yeah, is it coming from the sense that something's missing? I mean, in the example Lucy gave was like, if a house move can't happen, that's fine. I would prefer. So it's about preference, isn't it? I would prefer to have a new set of experiences. Moving a house will give me the opportunity to have those kinds of experiences. I would prefer those. Like I prefer to have fresh breath, so I make sure I clean my teeth every day. That's not desire in the reprehensible sense of the word. But if it's something that I will be happy when. I will be happy when I'm in the new house. Well, what does that mean about how you feel now? Why aren't you happy now? What's going on there? And that's what I mean about, you know, the person with the addiction to food. They're not looking at their unhappiness now. They're trying to get away from it. So with craving, it's always the movement. It's a movement to try to resolve the problem of suffering by gaining something that we think will be pleasurable and lasting, or to get away from something that we think is painful and lasting. That's the difference.
Yes, so I reckon a lot of time there's restlessness underneath the desire.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, there is a restlessness, a kind of existential restlessness, not at peace. And it comes back to this thing that we believe that we will gain that peace through the worldly endeavor, whatever that happens to be. But it never results, because you've got to confront that restlessness. And I go back to what I said to Sally before. It's like that restlessness, that existential restlessness, is based on a fundamental assumption, misplaced assumption about the nature of reality. So the only way to get to that underlying misapprehension is to deal with the restlessness rather than seek a solution for the restlessness. We're always chasing, running. You know, I've used the illustration of a hamster's wheel before, where the cheese is in front of the hamster on the hamster's wheel, and it's forever chasing the cheese, and behind it there's some sharp object behind it, so it's always running away from the sharp object. It's not actually going anywhere. So yes, but you know, how many meditators have changed jobs, changed careers, changed houses, changed where they lived in the world, and continued to meditate? You know, it's like how many meditators been practicing when they're young and then had children and carried on practicing meditation. It's like these are just life issues, you know. They're just the stuff of life. Was there another point, Mandy, or is that?
Yes, as you saw my face.
Yeah.
Yes, I also think, does it help then to remind yourself of, does this help me on my path when I do make this choice or not? Does it help me further, or does it help me? Yeah, is that a good daily question you could ask yourself?
So have I got this straight? If I make this choice, does it affect my ability to walk the path?
Yeah.
Does it interfere with?
Interfere, or the other way around? Does it serve me? Does it do me good on my path?
Yes, that's a very valid question, and I think perhaps it comes down to where we place walking the spiritual path in our priorities.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Alan would always say that it doesn't have to be your first priority, because if it was your first priority, you'd be in here as a monk or a nun, which is the choice I made. But often we've already made choices. By the time we discover the teaching, we already have a family, a house, a career, and we can't just drop those. So therefore it has to be, relative to where it comes in your priorities is going to be relative, but you can still get the job done, because at the base of all of this, the base of the entire teaching is mindful noting. And you can note mindfully anywhere at any time. It's just the choice to do it. It really is just being able to remember to do it and the choice to do it. It might not be, the best possible conditions in order to do the work, but they're good enough. It might take longer doing it that way with already with commitments, but that's fine. Those are your commitments. And it's more valuable for somebody living in the world who is a practicing meditator. It's more valuable for them, instead of wishing that they didn't have the family and didn't have the house and didn't have the career so I could go off and do this full time. It's actually more valuable for them to say, I surrender to the conditions. I surrender to the husband I have or the wife I have. I surrender to the way the kids turned out. I surrender to the dog. I surrender to the career. I surrender to it all, and I'll work with it. So if you're working with your current situation, it doesn't forbid you from seeking a change of conditions if that's what you choose. Because you're still going to be practicing mindful noting, whether you're in a big house, a little house, whether you're, you're still going to do it. So in that sense, it is your highest priority, because it can come along with you irrespective of what else you're doing. Unless you're off on some sort of murder spree or something, in which case probably meditation isn't a priority anyway. Forgive my terrible sense of humor. Is that okay, Mandy? Is that?
Yes, thank you very much, Paul. Yeah.
Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Sarah, you wanted to say something? Sarah's gone. So David Servo.
Oh, Sarah, if you press and
Yes,
hold
sorry.
the space button. Yeah.
Okay. Sarah, you there?
Hello, I think, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Hi. Yeah, it's just when Dave was talking about the difference between craving or desiring the house, it just kind of reminded me how, I don't know how quite to put it, but in everyday life you might, I've noticed that, again, if you do really, I really want to find this, like, I've been really not very good at finding a job to make money at, for example, but when I wasn't too bothered, but I would really quite like something, the universe kind of gave me it. without really having to seek it. How does that kind of fit into that? And a really lovely serendipity happening and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a long answer for that, but it takes such a long time to map it all out that it's very difficult to put it across. But we're not. How can I sum this up? We're not separate from the world. It is the fundamental illusion that there are separate objects and we live in this separated out world, and therefore the way that we think, the way that we influences the way we perceive the world. And so things are a lot more malleable and flexible and are not set in stone. And I have found it to be the case that the more I put all my eggs in the Dhamma basket, and that I accept that life is unfolding rightly, even in the most difficult and most challenging situations, life is actually unfolding as in the way that the only way it can. That these moments of serendipity, this sense that actually I am being thoroughly and properly looked after by life, it's just naturally there. And so I think rather than it being like this, the serendipity is like something that I somehow have to manufacture. It's rather it's the other way around. It's like it releasing from the sense in which I have to be in control of everything. Because I tell you, you're not in control of this moment. You're not in control of the atoms that are making up this experience. You're not in control of light. You're not in control of gravity. You're not in control of electromagnetic forces. You're not in charge of your liver, your heart. There is so little that you are actually doing to make this moment happen. And the more you surrender to the recognition of that, the more magical life becomes. The more you surrender to the mystery, the more the mystery rewards you. And life becomes just like this ongoing adventure in the utter strangeness of it all. So it's not like you're not resolving the mystery. You are just surrendering to it completely. And the Vipassana meditation is chipping away at that control. It's chipping away at that sense in which I have to be in control of everything in order to make life work for me. And all that passionate clinging that comes with it. And so you keep watching transients, you keep observing how things arise and pass away to these impersonal conditions. And it's gradually just chipping away at all those assumptions that cause you to cling to this very fixed view of life. And so the more that fixed view is chipped away at, and it just starts to come away in chunks. And the more free you are from it, the more you start to delight in the mystery. And these serendipitous occasions and this sense that somehow miraculously everything all fits together, it just seems to grow and grow.
Thank you. That's
yeah.
Great.
Okay. So it's like it comes back to that thing of like life doesn't always give you what you want, but it will always give you what you need. And that's where I think like things like contentment with little, living a moderate life, having moderate expectations, being able to live in a relatively minimal kind of way only helps you to see that there are these wonderful unknowable forces at work. And if we're too crowded with stuff that we have to look after and keep, it's that much more difficult to really truly see that. So having fewness of wishes, I think, helps tremendously with it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. Yes, it's interesting. It just had another thing happen where there is some influence on my part. It's still okay to ask. I thought I'll just put something out a couple of weeks ago, but I knew I wasn't attached. It was like, I'm just going to ask, see what happens, and it wasn't asking for money.
Oh,
it was just saying, hey. And I've had a really interesting lot of replies, of which 2 are like really beautiful. I might be friends and stuff, and not that I need friends, but you know what I mean. It's like, wow.
I know exactly what you mean. Sir. Look, if I'm planning a workshop, I need to let people know that there's a workshop, right? So all we've done previously is just put it on the Orkana website. We'll mention it on Wednesday evenings, and obviously able to mention it this evening. What I practice is confirmation bias. So if I've planned for a workshop, there's a workshop on the 7th of October. I want people to attend the workshop. We'll tell people that there's a workshop going by putting it on our website and announcing it on a Wednesday evening and so forth. And I choose to narrate that upcoming workshop in the way that, it's going to be really good. There's going to be plenty of people coming along. It's going to be a really good day. Really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it. It's going to be a really good day. And then if I get somebody inquiring about the workshop, confirmation, I was right. People really do want to come on this workshop. It is going to be a really good day. And even if somebody has said they're coming on the workshop and has then said, I can't make it, that is a test, which is its own confirmation of what's going to be unfolding. And the test is, am I going to passionately resist this? Am I going to lose my equanimity regard to this? Or am I going to include it and say, that's absolutely fine. That's just a test that proves the rightness of the workshop. So you're narrating it in such a way that you're constantly confirming that it is indeed going to come out the way you want it to come out. And you haven't manipulated anyone. You're not trying to coerce anyone. You're not trying to gain any kind of advantage through unwholesome means. you're just narrating it in the way that you're narrating it, confirming what it is that you want to happen. And so life is constantly giving you these perceptions where you can confirm that's the case. Oh yeah. So to get back to your point, if you want need something to happen, it's only right and proper that you should let somebody know or just go out and talk to people, because you're increasing the possibility then of those kinds of perceptions arising, which you can then confirm, oh, this is the way my life is flowing. This is the direction my life is going to go in. Yeah. I perhaps haven't expressed that quite as well as I want to, but that's essentially it.
That's great, thanks.
David Servo, finally.
I actually had a recent experience.
Oh, you've gone mute again, David.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was at a family gathering, and I was in the kitchen looking out at the pool, and I was seeing my nieces and my nephews playing in the pool. And then I kind of blinked because I was there, but then I was also then standing in the kitchen in the present moment as a middle-aged person. And then I saw my uncle in the foreground, and he was adjusting his breathing apparatus. And then I had the overwhelming terror that if I blinked again, I would be in his shoes. And so my question is that an observation of the mark of transience, or is that just me rejecting the present moment that old age is a feature of existence here?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, David. Because blimey, I mean, that's a very British expression, isn't it? Blimey. As you get older, I mean, I think there's something when we're young, we're able to ignore the signs of aging in others. And then when we start noticing it within ourselves, we start to really notice it in others. So, but by the same token, it is an undeniable observation of the true nature of reality. Change is inevitable. That's why the Buddha's. I always think that, you know, because when the Buddha was still the Bodhisattva, when he was still Prince Siddhartha Gautama, it was seeing the signs of old age, decay, and death that overwhelmed him and caused him to see the harsh realities of life, and to therefore renounce his worldly life in preference for pursuing spiritual enlightenment. But he was what, like 27, 28 when he did that? And I was thinking, well, when I was 27, 28, I wasn't paying the slightest attention to, you know, the suffering around me. So I think it's, don't deny the perception. Take it on board, but also take on board, you know, the Buddha's long lens view of life, that we've been born again and again and again and again and again, which means we've gone through old age, decay, and death again and again and again and again. And we're not the only ones. Everyone has. So on the one hand, it's like, yeah, you have to face up to the harsh realities. But on the other hand, it's giving us the momentum for realizing spiritual enlightenment ourselves, so that we don't have to keep coming back and go through the same process again.
Yeah, thank you. That was really helpful. The fact that you also said it was both, so I kind of removed the confusion.
Yeah. I mean, it's just certainly as I get older and how my body is changing against my will. And there's nothing you can sort of, you can postpone things a little while if you're really diligent, if you really watch what you eat, if you take the right vitamins, if you make sure you get exercise. But not even the Buddha could escape it. So, you know, we've got to use that knowledge as a springboard, really, because it helps us. It does help us with our priorities, doesn't it? If we're brave enough to do, courageous enough as meditators and spiritual workers, if that's the right word. I don't like the word seekers, you see. If we're brave enough, we can do a daily recollection of death, not in a morbid way, but in a way that reminds us of the finite opportunity we have, and that we do have our health, relatively speaking. We do have our wits about us. Our wits are not going to remain about us as we enter into our 70s, our 80s, our 90s. We're going to start losing all our faculties. So isn't it better to do the work now and raise it high enough in our priorities that we can really do a serious amount of spiritual work in this very lifetime? And who knows, if you really get into the mindful noting and you're observing transience at the moment-to-moment level, who knows, you could pass through all the insight knowledges yourself.
And I guess the takeaway is that to just try and use that terror as a kind of fuel then for the practice.
Yes, it's actually a positive thing. It's actually telling you something you really need to know. It's asking you not to ignore it, I think.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Really, really nice to hear you. Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
There was a really good post this morning on the Facebook page about the paramis, and there was a comment on it that really struck me, that the Buddha recommended approaching the generosity parami first, because it not only brought the others along with it, but it also had a very quick feedback loop. So I just wanted to ask, could you take us through the different types of giving?
Oh, well, there's which order to do them in. All right, let's start at let's start at the not the questionable kind of giving, which is beggarly giving, which is like giving to get rid of something that you no longer want. There's a form of giving. There's giving to get. So it's a kind of manipulative giving. You're actually wanting something in exchange from the other person. So if I'm really generous to you, you can't. If I'm really generous and benevolent to you, you can't point out my faults. That's what I came across not so long ago. So it's this expectation that if this person has been really kind to me, so you've got no right to point out things to me. So that's giving to get, isn't it? So that's not very healthy. There's one more. Sorry, Paul, there's one more.
Go on. Yeah.
Kingly giving, where you give genuinely because you want to give the gift to somebody, and you expect nothing in return. And that truly is the highest form of giving. So the Buddha gave without the expectation of anything in return. It was genuine. And, I know that this center has been run on the same basis. Kingly giving, you give the teaching as best you can. And life looks after you. So you don't need anything back. You don't need to be given anything back because life provides amply, because you're doing the most important thing in the world. So, sorry, Paul, I cut you off. What was your next point? So those three types: beggarly, giving to get, and kingly. Unless there's another framework for generosity.
No. So the follow-up question I had was, for the first two types of giving, which don't really feel very much like giving, will they have a positive resultant because they are classified as giving?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll still get a result, but it will be a mixed result, won't it? I'm trying to think of the classic example. Yes, there's in the suttas. There's there's this very rich man who wore rags and had a worn-out old horse and cart, and the monks asked the Buddha why it was so that he was such a rich man, but that he lived like a poor man. And the Buddha said, well, in a past life, he was extraordinarily generous to a Sangha, spiritual community, but then later on he regretted having been so generous. So his resultants were tainted. So his generosity brought him riches, but his subsequent regret meant that he couldn't enjoy his riches. And I think that's a lovely illustration of the way the law of karma actually works. Yeah. So he still gets the result of his giving, even though he later reneged on it.
That's great. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. Hi, Lucy.
Hello. I was just wondering, what's the difference between giving to get and practicing generosity, knowing that it's beneficial to, there will be wholesome resultants of practicing generosity.
Which means you don't have to ask for anything. You don't have to give with the intention of getting anything back. If you know that the law of karma is real, and that therefore the act itself is going to be beneficial, and I think it is really healthy to reflect on the fact that giving is a parami, giving is wholesome karma. If it's done with the fullness of spirit and full heart, and and there is nothing expected in return, I know that I'm going to, in the grand scheme of things, these positive waves are going to come back my way in some way, shape, or form. And that kind of links with Sarah's serendipity, that, you get these amazing moments of luck, in inverted commas, come your way. Is that because of is it some past karma that is producing its result now? So I would say that the reflection on acts of generosity is not in itself selfish. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But it is marred. The generosity is marred when there is that selfish component which says, and as a consequence of me giving this to you, you have to like me, or you have to, yeah.
So is it maybe, if you expect something from the other person, that's doing it in the kind of less wholesome way. But if you're just giving because you know that that's a good,
well, how does it feel doing it free from any baggage, free from any psychological baggage or expectation? The actual act itself feels so much more genuine and uplifting. It's got an intrinsic reward. The actual giving itself has this intrinsic reward, which means you don't actually have to seek a reward for it. And yet there's going to be an extrinsic reward, because the law of karma means all the waves are going to find their way back to you. And it also, generosity, it is an act that reflects an attitude of having faith in life. So, well, I'm not sure I can give because I don't know. There's another story in the Pali Canon of a man and his wife who were so poor they had one shirt between them or something. It was that's very poor. And they went to see the Buddha, and I think they did something like surrendered their one last garment. So they were so poor, they were just butt naked. And it just so happens that the king was in attendance at this meeting and saw this act of absolute devotion and free giving and, faith in life. And so I think he rewarded them with a kingdom or something. So they got the results like almost immediately. Now, I don't want anyone turning up, taking off their clothes at the center. It doesn't work like that. It's just a story, right? But you get the point.
Well, thank you, Paul.
Oh dear. Right. Any more before I lose it completely? Well, that's almost an hour, so I think we've done really well. So it's lovely to see everyone. Our burgeoning, blossoming online Sangha. It's great. So we'll have another meeting in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, if anyone wants a chat, you're very welcome to arrange something. I'm available on Facebook Messenger, FaceTime, Skype, Zoom. So we've got plenty of options. In the meantime, unless there's any more, I'll speak to you again in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes.
Thanks, Ray.
Paul.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
And Lucy, thank you for continuing to run the meetings. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, see you soon.
Session.